you're all Wisconsinites, so I'm sure you're familiar with Bayfield. And I went over there and I spoke to the high school, and it was a really fun event. The kids were just so interested. We talked about ghost stories all day long. And I had so much fun that I went to, if anybody's familiar with Bayfield, there's an old boarding house called Grunke's in Bayfield. It's 150 years old. It started its life as a boarding house, and now it's a bar and restaurant. And then they rent out rooms upstairs. And so I went there for lunch after the event. And I was the only one in there. I was the only one in the restaurant. And this server recognized me. She said, "Oh my gosh, you're Wendy Webb. You write these really good, scary books, and we love them." And she said, "This place is haunted." And I thought, "Really?" And she looked over her shoulder and she said, now I don't remember the guy's name, but what I imagine it was Gary, because if you've read the book, there's a Gary in the book. "Gary, come on out here and tell this gal about how haunted this place is." So Gary lumbers out from the back room and just goes on kind of a rant. And he said, "Listen, every day I look up and one of them's floating through the dining room." So I thought, oh, wow, what a good place to start a book. And I just on the spur of the moment decided I was going to stay overnight, and I stayed a couple of nights there. And that is the setting for the book. It's set in this old boarding house. Now, so I have my setting, but I didn't know what the story was going to be. I always write about a heroine who's kind of finding her way after something has happened in her life. And most of my books kind of start out that way. But I started thinking about what could happen in this boarding house and the people that she would encounter. And I kind of created this situation where there would be summer lodgers. So you could rent the rooms by the month or by the summer. And so the same people would be there. So there's this cast of characters to populate this place. Well, around that same time, something interesting was happening in real life in the house next door to me. My neighbors, a couple who I have based Jason and Gil on, if you've read the book, those are real life people. Names changed to protect the innocent. They're a married couple, and they really did take in the Jason characters. I'll just call him Jason from now on. Jason's former wife, who was suffering from early onset Alzheimer's disease. And she was the most lovely, polite, gracious lady. She was maybe 65 years old. And she looked younger than that, but she had had Alzheimer's for about 5 years. And her daughter had been taking care of her, but couldn't anymore because the daughter had a bunch of young kids, and Alice, let's just call her, was getting worse, and she was starting to wander. And the daughter just couldn't keep track of her and the kids, and it was just getting hard. And they thought, okay, next step is a nursing home. And so they were looking for nursing homes, and Jason came home just crying one day and said, I don't want to put her in a place where she's not with family. So he and Gil had Alice come live with them for real. And it was just now, years later, I'm getting so that I can talk about it without crying. But to me, it was one of the most beautiful acts of love I've ever seen. And especially Gil, he would come over and we'd drink wine on my front steps, and he'd go, "Well, today she doesn't know who I am and she doesn't know why I'm here." But that's just kind of what you do for family. And it was this wonderful and heartbreaking and beautiful situation. She passed away at the end of that summer, but she got to live the last summer of her life with the great love of her life. And it was just so beautiful. So I thought, oh man, I want to put that in a book someday. So I thought, okay, I've got that part of it. And actually, I sat him down, and when I decided I wanted to put this in the book, I got their blessing to do it. And when the advanced reader copies, because you get when before your book gets officially published, you get these this is one of them actually. They look just like the regular book, but they're to send out to libraries and bookstores and readers to get reviews before your book comes out. And I gave one to them, and they went on vacation. This is just before the book came out. And I got this call from Jason, and he was bawling. I started bawling. Gil's bawling in the background. And we all just cried. They loved the depiction of that situation. And with that, and with my writing about losing a mother, all that stuff's real. Everything that you read in the book, it all happened in regard to Bryn losing her mom. And I have heard from so many readers who say, I just lost a parent, and wow, I really could relate to what you wrote there. I've heard from a lot of people who have relatives and loved ones who have Alzheimer's. And that has been really, it just, the first time, okay, and I'll just admit this, right? As authors, our agents tell us, do not read your own reviews, because there's going to be good reviews and there's going to be bad reviews. But one night, I was kind of up in the middle of the night, and I thought, oh, I'm going to read my 5-star reviews, because I wanted to know, I thought it would just make me feel happy to know that people really like the book. And one of them said, I lost my wife of 63 years to Alzheimer's 2 months ago, and your book helped me put one foot in front of the other. And I read that, and I cried for an hour. It was like, I've never heard that from readers before. I tend to write kind of spooky, fun mysteries, gothic in genre, and but this was something different again. And I've heard from a lot of people that it has helped them. So I just don't really know how to express how touched I have been by all those people who have been touched by my book. It's been really gratifying. Now, so Jeanette also wanted me to talk about what's coming next. And I just have finished my 7th novel, and it's with the editors now, and we're talking about covers, so it's kind of the fun part, one of the fun parts. And that novel is it's going to be called The Keepers of Metzen Vallow, and it's also set in the same town, fictional town that I've set a bunch of books in now. I call it Wharton. Everybody knows it's Bayfield. And it is set on the island. If you're familiar with that area, there's an island just off shore from Bayfield, maybe a 20-minute ferry ride. It's called Madeline Island. I've called it something else. And I've set this new book there. And the thing that inspired me to write The Keepers of Metzen Vallow is my mother's heritage. I started thinking about, my mom was 100% Finn, the daughter of immigrants. And I started thinking about her heritage and her folk tales. And I researched it a little bit, and I found out that J.R.R. Tolkien used this epic Finnish poem called the Kalevala to write Lord of the Rings. And I thought, what? I didn't know that. He even learned Finnish to be able to read it in the original language. And I thought, what? So I started researching it, and I found that when the Vikings were pillaging and conquering and murdering and going everywhere, they left the Finns alone because they thought that the Finns were wizards and witches and could control nature. And they could control the seas and either give them calm seas or sink their boats. And they could control the weather. Now, I don't know how the Finns pulled this off, but that's what the Vikings thought. And I thought, well, that's really cool. And I thought, I wonder if that was real. And what would it look like if that kind of, because every heritage and every culture has their own folk tales. And I started thinking, what if those folk tales were real? What would that look like in modern day? And so that was the impetus for that story. And I'm really happy with the way it turned out. It's a little bit of a departure. Daughters of the Lake has a lot of that in it. If you've read Daughters of the Lake, it's very, there's a lot of storytelling involved in that book, and not just the main plot, but backstory and kind of folk tales and tales of the region. And this takes out just one step further. It's like, okay, what if those folk tales were alive and happening in modern times, and how would that, what kind of trouble would people get into because they're dealing with these ancient folk tales? So that I'm excited about, and it's going to be coming out, I guess, for Halloween again. So Jeanette, anything else that I should? I've been babbling on now for about 20 minutes.
Okay. Well, one question that came to my mind already, and maybe this will play into your discussion with us, is, different writers have different approaches to their writing. And one thing that always strikes me is how things unfold, and at the end, they turn out to be so much more complicated than you realize that they were going to be from a reader's point of view. So I was wondering, as you're writing, when you sit down to write a story, or a story comes to you, do you kind of know how it's going to end, or do you just start and then it kind of evolves? And yeah, how does that go for you?
Yeah, they call it, the seat of your pants. Yeah, I'm a pantser. I don't know much of anything. I know the location or the setting, and I kind of had an idea of the main character. And for this one, for Haunting of Bryn, I knew that I wanted to put that storyline of Jason and Gil in there, but I didn't want that to be the main thing. I wanted that to be kind of a subplot. But that's really all I knew. And I just started writing. And when I was writing this, I was renting a house in a suburb of Minneapolis here, and I had a real big backyard, and I had a nice deck. And so I wrote a lot of this sitting on my deck in the backyard. And this book is so emotional. I was bawling writing the whole thing. And my neighbors would be like, Wendy, you okay over there? Everything all right? Especially the end. Somebody said that they haven't read the ending yet, so I'm not going to say anything about it. But when you get to the end, just know that I was weeping as I was writing it, and it's my favorite ending of any book that I've written, for sure, and maybe even read. I was so happy with the way it turned out, and even that last line. if any of you have finished it. But yeah, so I really don't know, and that's the fun of it for me. I find I know writers who agonize over the writing process. For me, it's just the opposite. It is such a joy, and it's so much fun. And I think it's because I don't know what's coming. So I'm just as surprised by twists and turns that happen in the plot as readers are, because I don't know either. But a thing that I have had to do is sort of pace myself. So my books are about 100,000 words long. So I just let her rip until I'm at about 50. And then to me, it's like I've described it as kind of climbing the mountain and then going back down. And when I'm at the top of that mountain, now it's time for me to tie everything together and close any loopholes that I've left. And so that, the first 50 is pretty freewheeling, but then the last 50 is, okay, I've got to tie this all together. Because one thing I don't do, and thank goodness I haven't ever had to do, is revise anything. So I kind of keep a big picture of it. I know some writers use Post-it notes and things, and I don't do any of that. It's just more of a feeling, and so that's kind of how it happened. But the new book, the Keepers of Metz and Vallow, that was a little harder to freewheel, because I had to be the folk tales that I've weaved in are real folk tales, and so I had to be authentic about that. And this is the first I've heard of all these Finnish folk tales. But the Finns have, like the Irish have the elves and the fairies, and the Finns have the Vaki, or it might be called Vaki, I'm not sure. But they're like that, and they control nature and animals and sometimes even people. So I had to be really, and it can go bad. And it does go bad. But I had to be careful when I was writing that one.
Are there other questions from other participants? I'll unmute everybody. I'll see how I do that again. Let's see. Oh gosh.
Oh, hi, Gretchen.
You can unmute yourself as well.
Hi, Wendy. How are you? Oh, now Wendy's muted.
Oh dear. Oh dear. Can you unmute yours, Wendy, from where you are?
There we go.
Bottom.
Yep, got it.
So Wendy, my question is, when are you going to name a character Gretchen in one of your books?
Maybe next one. I got to start writing a book, so I got to come up with the next one now.
It's a good name.
There's a question in the chat too, Wendy. It says, do you ever have sleepless nights? Oops, what happened?
Oh, I saw it. Do
for many
have
of your
sleepless
books.
nights? Okay, so yes. And this actually happened to me when I was writing my first book. I don't know if any of you have read The Tale of Halcyon Crane, but well, that book changed my life, so it's very close to my heart. But the one of the scary parts of that book is that there are triplets, little girl triplet ghosts, and they're not. They're pretty naughty, and they scared me more than once when I was writing it. And once I woke up, and my husband was not home, and I was by myself, and I had my big dog there. But I woke up in the middle of the night, and I was scared, and I was looking around for those little ghosts. And then I thought, oh, come on now, you made them up. You did it. They're not real. But yeah, sometimes I do.
That's funny.
Okay, somebody else had a question in the chat. Let's see, how do I do that?
It says, how long does it take you to complete a book?
Well, what I will give you my stock answer, and then I'll tell you the truth. My stock answer is 6 months. And if I have a year to complete it, that's awesome. But with The Haunting of Bryn Wilder, I found that I can write a book in 2 months because I had a deadline, and I procrastinated, and I thought I had longer, and my agent called me and she said, hey, how's the book going? And I had maybe 10,000 words written, and I said, great, it's going great. And and she said, good, because it's due in a month. And I went, oh, maybe it won't be done in a month. And so she got an extension, and that's just what I did. I focused on that, and I got it done. And it actually, I'm going to say that kind of pressure made the story come easier, and I think it turned out great. So, but I'm not going to do that to myself again, because that was a lot of pressure right there. But I can write it. I can write 7, 8, 10,000 words in a day.
Wow.
And I think that's because I've been a journalist my whole career, and so I'm used to writing all day. So that's not the hard part. The hard part is the making it interesting.
Someone wants to know about your antique typewriter.
Oh, funny you noticed that. Yeah, I got it. Well, it's haunted. I got that for my birthday about 5 or 6 years ago, and this is when I was living up in Duluth, Minnesota, and I was living in an old house, and I had the typewriter on this table in my dining room, and I was supposed to be working, writing, but instead I was sitting in the living room watching TV. And I was procrastinating. Funny, now this is all coming out. I'm a procrastinator. But I was watching something on TV, and I went to reach for the remote, and I couldn't find it. And I thought, well, that's weird. And I got up and wandered around, and the remote was sitting right next to the typewriter. And I thought, well, maybe I wandered into the kitchen and I set it down. It happened 3 times. And at the 3rd time, I thought, I guess I should be writing instead of sitting here.
That's funny.
In fact, my son came to visit. My son lives in Houston now, against my wishes. And he came to visit with his girlfriend, and he was showing her around, and he said, yeah, that typewriter's haunted right there. And he was kind of scared of it.
You have
Wendy,
2
I
other questions? Oh, go ahead.
Oh, go ahead. Wendy, I love the prologue you read, and I know that there are some real biases in the publishing industry about them, and it just suits your story. Did you have to really fight to have prologues in your book?
I like prologues because they set a really kind of creepy tone, and I like an epilogue too. And I had a really creepy epilogue in The Vanishing, and I didn't have it in there initially, but I finished the book and I sent it to my agent, and then she said, what if you write a really creepy epilogue? So I banged it out in about a half hour, and that is what really attracted the editor to it. So I've been lucky that I haven't had any pushback there isn't one in my new book, so I don't use them every time, but this time really it seemed like it seemed necessary.
Thank you.
There's a question about when did your writing career begin?
Well, I knew I was going to be an author when I was about 10 years old, maybe even earlier than that. My grandma read Little Women to me. And Gretchen, you've heard the story, I'm sure. I loved that book so much, and I identified with Jo March, one of the characters in it. And because she was a dark-haired tomboy, and so was I, and so obviously the book was about me, which I thought, and she was a writer, and she ended up as an author. And so I thought, well, okay, I guess that's what I am. And so I identified with that my entire growing up, and I got a lot of praise from teachers for my writing. And then when I got out of school, I worked in Washington for 3 years, DC, after college. And then I came back to Minnesota and thought, well, okay, I'm a writer, so I better just start being a writer now. And got a job at a local newspaper here in Minneapolis. And so I've been writing my whole career. My first book was published in 2010, but like I said, I've known that was coming my entire life. And actually, I had occasion a couple of years ago to be out east, and on our way back to the airport, we were going right by Concord, Massachusetts, which is where Louise Alcott's home is, and it's now a museum. And so I said, oh, I gotta stop. I gotta see where she wrote Little Women. And so they were giving tours, and I got the last ticket on this particular tour, and it was me and a group of tourists who did not speak English. No, you're not Joe. Beth, no. I'm Joe. And so we were going through the house, and I was getting really emotional because the book is set in her family home. It's like, oh, there's the living room, there's the dining room, there's, and then we went up to her bedroom, and there was this little desk sitting by a window, and the window looked out over this orchard. And the tour guide said, and this is where Louisa May Alcott wrote Little Women. And I started bawling like a crazy woman. And just like the ugly cry, like Oprah says, the ugly cry, that's what I was doing. And the people couldn't speak English, and they were just looking at me, and as a group, they kind of moved away, like, who's that crazy lady? But the tour guide said, let me guess, you're an author. And I said, yeah. And she said, yeah, we get a lot of that here. So a lot of people really identified with that character, and it just made me so emotional that what if she didn't sit at that desk and write that book? What would I be doing now? And it just kind of illustrated the power of a great story. Now I saw a question. I'm not seeing all the questions, but I saw one that said about writer's block. No, I don't get it. I think it's just a matter of sitting down and starting to type. Just write something. And it might not be great. It might not be exactly what you want, but even if you don't know where it's coming from, just start writing. That's what I do. There's really no trick to it. I just start typing words.
There was another
Wendy, this is Gretchen.
Go ahead. There was a question about whether or not you drink wine while you're writing, and if so, what's your favorite kind of wine, and what upstarts
Gretchen,
your writing process?
Sometimes I do. I do sometimes. And I like a Chardonnay, as do a lot of mine. And so I have some wine here tonight because happy hour is a big part of this book. And it's even a part of the ending of the book. So I thought, cheers, it's happy hour.
Yeah. Cool.
Wendy, this is Gretchen. I have a question. So my friend Becky's on the call and she's from Cumberland. She's the one that pointed this out to me, so I wanted to join. But we're going to get our group together to do a book club next month. No, in March. In March. Which book would you suggest for us to read that would probably bring out the best discussions?
Oh, that's like Sophie's Choice right there, Gretchen. Um, if people haven't read Daughters of the Lake, that's a really, it's spooky, but it's also romantic. There's a great love story in there, and there's a lot of layers to a lot of the characters. People have said that they love one of the main. The story is told in the present and in the past, and in the past there's this great love story, and the guy has just a lot of facets to him, and I really love that character, and I love to hear what book clubs have to say about him. Because some people love him, some people don't love him. So maybe that one.
Okay, well, I read that one. It's a good one.
Jeanette, can you see the other questions?
Yes. There was one that you've kind of already answered about how long does it typically take to start and finish a novel. And then there was a question a while back about where do you write? I was trying to find that one. And I think you told us, here, do you write at curtain hours or in a secluded area?
Oh, no. I know a lot of writers that do have schedules, like they'll wake up and they'll write for 3 hours and then get on with their day. I don't really do that, though. I don't have a set schedule, but a lot of times, especially when I was writing my earlier books, I am not a great sleeper. And so I'll wake up in the middle of the night and I will be wide awake. And that's a really good time to, sit and write a chapter in a scary, kind of spooky novel. The whole house is asleep, even the dog's snoring, so there's no distractions, and that's kind of a good time to do it. But I don't know. I'm sort of a midday sort of person.
I know writing is a very difficult process, and it takes its toll, especially like you were talking earlier about having a deadline, and you want to get things wrapped up. So what do you do to refresh yourself or replenish yourself outside of writing? What really stokes you up again, besides drinking wine?
Well, I walk the dog a lot. I now have, I've had Malamutes my whole life, and I put them in my books. Now I've got a white German Shepherd, so that's a first. But even if I don't get, like we talked about writer's block, and I don't get writer's block, but what I do get sometimes is, oh my goodness, where am I going to go now? Have I written myself into a corner? What's my character going to do next? Or, what's a couple steps down the road? And that's a really good time to just shut my computer and put the dog on the leash and just go and take a nice long walk. And that usually does the trick. So that's what I do to recharge.
Yeah. So you just have finished a book that you say is coming out in October. Are you driven to start another one now? Do you have some ideas circulating?
I do. Well, the only idea that I have, and I'm gonna have to finish this within a year, so I got to get going. But I, or I could procrastinate for 8 months and then bang it out in 2. But I've set a lot of these books in the same town, but never in the winter. And winter is such a big part of what we deal with here in the Midwest, and especially, you know, Lake Superior in the winter is just so fierce and unforgiving, that I think I'm gonna, and the town will be sort of deserted in the winter because it's a tourist town, as Bayfield is. And so I think I'm gonna, this is the only thing I have is I want somebody in her own family home in the winter, in a sort of semi-deserted town. That's all I got.
Sounds like a good start.
Didn't you have a book? Didn't you have a
Yeah.
book up by Graham Murray that was in the winter?
Oh, well, that actually was it. That's The Vanishing.
Yeah.
Yes, and that. Oh, so you remember? Yeah, I did. I have a cabin in north of, well, up the Gunflint Trail from Grand Marais,
Okay.
and I love it up there in the winter so much because it's not crowded, and it's so beautiful, and it's so quiet. Just the snow just muffles everything, and I just love it there in the winter. So that's kind of how I got the idea for The Vanishing. I thought, well, okay, this is when Downton Abbey was on, and I thought, and I was obsessed with the house, and I thought, what if there's a big house like that up in the middle of nowhere, and what could have happened there, and who would have lived there, and that book, by the way, okay, so I want to say I'm not one to brag, but I am a Leo, so I am one to brag. But that book, The Vanishing, got one of the top 10 horror novels of the decade. Number 3 for Stephen King was number 5.
Oh.
But that was a huge surprise to me. I didn't even know it was under consideration for that.
The ending of that one was unreal. I just, whoo, okay.
That one scared my son too. He took the advanced reader's copy. He was going on a plane out to visit his dad in California, and he took that and he got off and he called me and all he said was, "Mom, what is lurking inside your mother?"
I know, I just don't know where you get your ideas. You amaze me.
Thank you. Yeah, it's you know, it's kind of deep and dark and dusty up there. So
Oh.
Other questions from participants? You can unmute yourself and ask away.
I'm trying to think if there's anything that I haven't said about this book. Like I said, a lot of it is this Haunting of Bryn Wilder. A lot of it comes from real life. Oh, okay. Here's one thing. One of my favorite books when I was in high school was The Illustrated Man by Ray Bradbury.
Oh.
And that, not too many people have read that book, but we read it in our English class and it just stuck with me. And what it is it's a collection of short stories, but they're all tied together. And the prologue is, and Ray Bradbury wrote this in like 1953. And there was this man, they called them hobos back then. And he was sitting by the fire and another man came and said, hey, can I share your fire and, you know, warm up and spend the night here with you, brother? And the guy said, sure. There's only one condition, and that is when we go to bed and I take my shirt off, do not look at me. I'm just telling you, don't look. Of course, when they, go to sleep, they're each in their on their own little blankets, and the guy takes his shirt off and rolls over. Of course, the other guy looks. The man is covered in tattoos, and what this other gentleman sees is that the tattoos start to move and tell stories.
Wow.
And the short stories in the book are what the tattoos, the stories that the tattoos tell this visitor. They're creepy, but they're also unbelievable. One of them, my favorite one, is called The Veld, and it's these two spoiled kids of rich parents who are living in what really is a smart house. Now, this thing was written in 1953, and everything is automated in the house, and it's like a smart home, and they've got this, basically it's a flat screen TV on the wall of their bedroom that's like a holodeck from Star Trek, and they can play something on this TV, and then they can walk into it. And what their favorite game is to go to Africa to a veldt and to see animals, and it ends badly. But what I can't figure out is how Ray Bradbury thought of that and he probably wrote it in the late 40s because it was first published in 53. And I thought, how in the name of, Leonard Nimoy did you think of this thing? Another story in there is two astronauts who have been on a spacewalk, and their tethers have broken and they're falling to Earth, and their communications between each other, like they have a radio in their helmets, that's still on. So they're talking to each other as they're falling to Earth. And I thought, how are you envisioning a spacewalk in 1953? And so part of that is it's been and actually when I was on tour for Daughters of the Lake, I went to a bookstore in Connecticut, and I told that story and said, yeah, this inspired my next book that I'm just about done with. And a guy was in the audience, and he said, oh yeah, I knew Ray Bradbury, he was my mentor. And I went, what? And then he said, yeah, he gave me the original manuscript of The Illustrated Man. And I said, what? And of course I said, can I see it? And he said, no, you can't see it, but I'll send you a picture of it. It's in my safety deposit box. And this guy was Ray Bradbury's mentor, and Ray Bradbury gave him, and he was a budding writer himself, and Bradbury gave him this manuscript and said, hey kid, here's your retirement in case writing doesn't work out. And he signed the manuscript. And I thought, hey, unreal that I was going to put that I put that in my book. And then at one of my readings at a little bookstore in Connecticut, here's this guy. So that part of that is woven through the story of Haunting of Bryn too.
That's very interesting. Thanks for sharing that. And speaking of signings, we wish you were here so that you could sign your books and we could see you in person. And we hope that that'll be a possibility in the future too, with your new books coming out. So we'll have to keep in touch with you.
Well, I look forward to it. I'm hopeful that, next year when my book comes out, we can all creep out of our homes and interact with each other again. And I would love to come and see you all.
Yeah. I was telling Wendy that we have a wonderful old Carnegie library here in Cumberland, and we're always happy for everybody to come and visit us here and show it off. And Wendy has kind of started off this new year for us in a mystery writers tour. In February, we will be having Barbara Deese here, who's in our audience tonight, talking about her books and her writing process. And then in March, we will have David Housewright also from the Twin Cities area, talking about his vast legacy of stories. He's got quite the series that he's written over the years. So we're just excited to have had you here today and to get this jump started in our new, better year, 2021. And it's been really interesting listening to your stories. And I have to admit something to you. I did not start the recording when you started speaking. So would you mind terribly if you read that prologue one more time? Because I missed that. Thank you.
Sure, it won't take long.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to. Okay. Everyone is haunted by something. A road not taken, a hurt carried deep inside, harsh words that echo long after the sting of them is carried away on the wind. Some of us are haunted more literally. We've seen and felt and heard what simply cannot be, but is. A low moan coming from the corner of a darkened room, a glib and ethereal shape, a tangible encounter with something, a passer through. My haunting is like that, strange, magical, unexplainable, but at the same time, it's real enough to touch and feel and wrap my whole self around, real enough to inhabit my dreams and sit like a stone on my heart as I carry it with me day after day. Memories of other parts of my life over the years, love, loss, the mundane minutia of living, might be hazy around the edges, dreamlike, as I look back on them now. But when I think of him, the one who haunts me still, the images are crystal clear. Even after all of these years, I can taste him on my lips. I hear his voice low and deep in my ear. I love him with every cell in my body, even now. As I sit alone with my thoughts in this empty house, in the dark, a fire crackling in the fireplace and snow falling outside, it all comes back to me. And I'll let it come. God help me, I will let it come. So begins the haunting of Bryn Wilder. Well, thank you everybody so much for coming. This was fun. As I said, I'd love to do, readings in person, but this is the next best thing. It was great to be able to do this in my little office. And thank you so much for coming. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Well, thank you again. And we will see you here in person in the future.
Okay, that's a date.
All right.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jeanette.
Can you back out of there? I'm gonna see if I can connect to that other one that I was supposed to be at.